Hey everybody, Mike Shelby here. Welcome back to my channel, Forward Observer. If you're looking for daily intelligence updates, if you want to know what's going on in terms of current events, head over to Early Warning Network. I'll post a link in the description. That's our intelligence channel. So we are pushing all of our daily briefings over there. Be sure to subscribe over there. Now, in terms of the future of this channel, I really want to get back to my roots and teach intelligence as a full-time job. So as a byproduct, if you're not already subscribed, please do, because this is what this channel is going to be about. A couple weeks ago, I did a video presentation, a training webinar on crisis intelligence, talking about the 3 pillars of crisis intelligence. These are the 3 assets that you need to have developed going into a disaster or a crisis. And so that means you must develop them prior to the start of a crisis. And so this video was about 3 things. Number 1, area studies or area intelligence. Number 2, intelligence networks. You need local sources. You need eyes and ears in your neighborhood and your broader community. And so that part of the video was about how to develop intelligence networks. And then finally, number 3 is real-time collection. We've got to turn on our whiz-bang gear and start collecting information that's being put out around us. And so this collectible. So what we're going to do is I'm going to post that video right here on this channel in its entirety, but I'm going to break it up into 3 sections. Number 1 is the area study and area intelligence. Number 2 is intel networks. Number 3 is real-time collection. If you want to watch the entire presentation, you can. You can also download the 20-page ebook companion that I wrote, the Crisis Intelligence ebook. Just go to my website, forwardobserver.com/crisis. Put in your email address. I'll send you the ebook. You can watch the video. For now, let's go ahead and get into area studies and area intelligence. And next week, I'll publish the Intel Networks and the real-time collection video after that. Thanks for watching. Let's get into it. What I'm about to teach you, I hope, is going to radically change how you think about disaster preparedness and security planning. If you're new to this, I hope some light bulbs start going off. And I hope that you start to realize that all the prepper gurus and the professional bug out backpackers have kind of been leading you astray by putting way too much importance on gear and sustainment. Sustainment is going to get you into tomorrow. Sustainment does not win the war. It does not solve the local problems you face. And they're not putting enough emphasis on what actually solves the problems. And we say intelligence drives the fight for a reason. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. This is the foundational intelligence document. I mean, the area study is foundational for all emergency preparedness and security planning. I highly recommend after you have accrued 2 weeks of emergency supplies, you immediately do your area study. Start work on it, because this is how you assess your area. And people ask me, Mike, what should I be preparing for? Well, start with your area study, because it's going to tell you exactly what to prepare for. Now, I want to share with you a story from Travis Haley. It's 2014. I watched this video here where Travis, it's all up on YouTube. It's a fantastic video. And he's talking about the 10-year anniversary of the Battle of An-Najaf in Iraq. And he recounts being in Najaf, and he was at the Coalition Provisional Authority compound. So this is the interim Iraqi government. And his group of Marines and contractors are being attacked by the Mahdi army. This is Jaish al-Mahdi. These are the Shia insurgents, Shia extremists, as we called them. And the American guys just end up killing a ton of those insurgents. It is a great video if you haven't seen it. And I want to point out something that's very, very important here. Here's what he had to say. He said, quote, "One of the big things that bothered me was not knowing my surroundings, the indigenous people, the Mahdi army. We didn't study that stuff. It wasn't our job to do that. And I wish I would have. I wish I would have understood who those people were, what their motivations were, and why I had to sit there as long as I did with a rifle and kill people. So that bothers me." It's a fantastic video. Go watch it. Now, towards the end of this video, he's talking about his desire to have more information when he's put in future scenarios, including building his home defense plan. And my first thought was, Travis, I hope you do an area study. When we are talking about emergency scenarios or disasters or SHTF, shit hits the fan scenarios, what we're really talking about is conflict. Man versus man, man versus society, man versus nature. And what man really needs in each of those scenarios, well, he needs a lot of things, but one of those is intelligence. And specifically, he needs local intelligence and all the benefits that having local intelligence brings. And that's why we start with an area study. Let me tell you another quick story here. This is a real world story also about how an area study saved a lot of time and trouble and heartache. It's September 2019. We are volunteering with the Cajun Navy, just a bunch of rednecks and Cajuns in their monster trucks and John boats and rafts and bass trackers. We're doing intelligence support for these guys and their search and rescue teams in Lumberton, North Carolina. This is Hurricane Florence. And when these search and rescue teams on the ground got the green light from the county sheriff is going to allow them to run search and rescue in his county. And so they have all these monster trucks that can drive through water and these jet boats and rafts and all this equipment. And they need somewhere to stage it. They need somewhere to go set up and get ready to respond. So one of the guys finds this volunteer fire department station. And the sheriff says, yeah, sure, you can stage there, put all your gear and equipment there and use it as a base, essentially. This is about, 12 to 24 hours before Hurricane Florence makes landfall. And the director of the Cajun Navy throws it past me. I was the S2. I was the intel guy. He says, hey, do you think this is a good place to stage? And so the very first thing I do is bring up the floodplain maps. And I see that fire station is in a 100-year floodplain. And the problem is this is like a 1,000-year flood that was about to happen. This was one of the worst hurricanes in human record for that area. And so I called Sean up and I said, hey, your guys, it's not a good idea for them to stage there. And I tell him about the floodplain map and I send it to him. And I remember telling him it's going to be flooded by tomorrow and they're not going to be able to get in or out. And so he says, well, where should we send them to stage then? So I jumped back up on Google Earth and I started looking at the terrain and I find the highest point of elevation in the immediate area. And it's somewhere outside the floodplain. And it's a Walmart parking lot. And not only is there a Walmart there, because Walmart has basically everything you would want or need, there's also a restaurant and a hotel there, which is great for guys who need showers and need a good night's sleep and a good meal after running search and rescue for the past 48 hours. So they end up setting up there. And sure enough, after the hurricane comes through, that volunteer fire station was knee deep in water and all their gear would have been underwater. They would have been sleeping there. So they would have had to pack up all their stuff, put it back in the truck while it's raining cats and dogs in the middle of the night, maybe very early in the morning, and try to find somewhere that wasn't flooded. Guys, this is why every single disaster response team, every search and rescue team, everybody responding to any kind of disaster, any kind of anything needs to start with an area study. It really is the basis of all operational planning. Now, we need to do an area study because we fundamentally need to know two things. Number one, what am I up against? And number two, what do I have to work with? From everything from a tornado to an earthquake to another pandemic, collapse of society, the end of the world as we know it, zombie biker gangs, I don't care what it is, everything in between, we need to know what we're up against. So what are the local things that are going to get us? And then that's number one. The second thing is, what do we have to work with? Who are the local people and what are the local resources that I have or might have at my disposal? Who are the people and the resources that I can marshal to respond to these types of threats or to respond to this disaster? I cannot even imagine heading into a disaster without knowing what I'm up against at my local level, the things that are going to reach out and try to get me, and not knowing the people and the resources that I have to respond. So this is very simple, but 99% of preppers, and even those prepper experts with the professional 70-pound bug out bags and these $1 million retreat properties, they're clueless about this because they haven't done an area study. And there's a ton of videos on YouTube and they'll tell you here's the first 37 things you need to put in your bug out bag. And here's 100 prepper items you can't live without. And they got 1,000 videos on this crap and not one single video about knowing your surroundings, knowing your neighbors, understanding your local physical terrain, understanding your local critical infrastructure, understanding all these things that are going to affect you during an emergency. It just kind of makes sense to do your area study to me. So this is the bare bones basics here. We're only talking about 6 factors. And if you want a down and dirty area assessment, there are a few ways that I teach, and this is the most basic way. So we're going to start here with threats, hazards, and vulnerabilities. Okay, these are the things that you have to identify in your local area. And again, we can get in much greater detail. I do in the area intelligence workshop. I don't know, it's like 10 hours worth of videos on how to do your area study. But we're going to start here very basic: threats, hazards, and vulnerabilities. Threats and hazards are the things that are going to kill or injure us. So a threat is something with the intent and capability to do you harm. That might be like a gang. Hazards could be typically environmental. So that train derailment in Palestine or East Palestine, Ohio, that was an environmental hazard. It was a lethal hazard, not a threat. And then there are the vulnerabilities, and that makes us susceptible to negative outcomes. So if you live in the desert, you are vulnerable to drought conditions for most of the year. If you have 7 years of stored food, then you are vulnerable to having to move to another location and leaving it all behind. If you haven't done an area study, then you're vulnerable to not knowing what local threats and hazards and scenarios that you should be preparing for. Again, if you want to know what to prepare for, start here, because you'll find very quickly, these are exactly the scenarios that you need to be planning for. And then we can move over to resources, assets, and opportunities, which is what we have to work with. So you can start off by listing local assets. So these are the people and organizations who are willing to cooperate and work with you, maybe because they have the same politics or beliefs. Maybe they believe the same things, or they want the same things, like a secure community. And then we move on to resources. So these could be material goods, natural resources, production facilities that produce the things we need, anything that we can use during an emergency. And then we can identify our local opportunities. They could be commercial, financial, networking opportunities. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So in our area study, we identify all the bad stuff, and then we identify all the good stuff or potentially good stuff, and it becomes a blueprint for action. The threats and hazards are the things I need to prepare for. And then the resources and assets are the people and opportunities that I need to develop. So for me, there are really 2 things that I consider true preparedness, that make up true preparedness. Anybody can go out and buy stuff, buy food, buy water storage, but I don't really think that makes them prepared. Probably just makes them feel a lot better, but they're actually not prepared. So the first thing is having accurate expectations of the future. Once I know what can break in my local area or what can threaten me and the scenarios that I'm going to face at the local level, then I can direct my attention and my time and my money and my resources to dealing with those specific events or conditions. Otherwise, I'm just kind of guessing at what could go wrong. And I think that's just sort of playing at preparedness if I can't identify the most likely scenarios that I'm going to face. And then the second thing here is making sure that my stack of assets is bigger than my stack of threats. If I can develop specific resources and assets that counter specific threats and hazards, then I will be prepared. And if someone's not identifying these 6 things, then I guarantee you that that person is leaving some threats and hazards unidentified. And I guarantee you they're leaving some assets and resources off the table. I don't know about you, but I want everything I can get in an emergency. I want every asset and resource to be available to me during an emergency. And I want to identify every threat and hazard that I'm going to face so I can make sure that myself and my family are prepared. Now, there's one more thing I want to pass along here. And it really is crucial because lots of folks get hung up on the strategic level events, okay, like the big picture events. Like what happens if North Korea launches an EMP and nukes us back to the Stone Age? What happens if Al-Qaeda launches all these terror attacks? What happens if there's a cyber attack against the power grid? What if we go to war with China? What if we go to war with Russia? What if we go to war with Iran? Whatever happens, if there's a stock market crash or economic collapse or hyperinflation, zombie biker gangs, whatever, regardless of what happens in the future, you are going to be directly affected on your local area. And that is what you have to prepare for. So even in the absolute worst case scenario, you have to survive what happens at the local level. So the question really is, what are the local effects of all these high level strategic events? How does a war with China affect you out your front door, down your driveway, around your neighborhood, and across your broader community? Those are the things that directly affect you. Those are the things that we can identify and prepare for. And that is why we do an area study. And that does it for area studies and area intelligence. Thank you for watching. Do yourself a favor, head over to my website, forwardobserver.com/crisis. I'll put a link down in the description, and go ahead and download that crisis intelligence ebook. It has a lot more stuff in it that's not in this video, and I highly recommend that you get it. And then I'll be back next week for part 2 on intelligence networks. Thanks for watching, everyone. So until then, be well and stay out front.